Hallelujah. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are. Welcome back to Voice in the Wilderness. This is your host and teacher for the day, Maxie. Well, we are here today. Here's what we want to do. We closed off that multi-part series last time of the series about are you in or are you out, and I hope that was a real blessing to you. Right at the end, which was the last part of that series, we brought in a little innuendo, if you will, a little addition, if you will, called the Anatomy of Disobedience. And I wanted to kind of go into a different topic, but as I thought about it, I realized that this is kind of important. This anatomy of this subtopic that we pulled in last week, the anatomy of disobedience, so I wanted to make that. I wanted to take that subject line and give it its own teaching, if you will. And hopefully we can do it in one shot. And if not, as I said, it's always difficult when you're thinking about the things of God. It's always difficult to bring things to a close or to an end or to complete things, because remember, we're dealing with the living word, and the living word is exactly that. It lives, and as you talk it and teach it and live it, it gives life. It breathes life. So there's always layers upon layers upon layers, right? So I thought about that, and I thought that we want to dedicate at least one session, if you will, to that. And in order to do that, coming off of what we talked about last week with Paul, when he kept talking about sin, and I didn't know sin unless the law was there, and the law and sin came because of the law, and all these things that he was digging into, I thought that it would be very apropos to just go into this a little bit, because there's something we have to understand. See, we point fingers outwardly, and we make this big to-do that is her to blame, or is him to blame, or is that person, or is those people, is my neighbor, is everybody else's fault, and it's not yours. And in certain situations, it might be the case, but there are still things that we can do as individual people to not eradicate or alleviate, but to walk in the essence of who God is and in the essence of what he wants from us, right? So in order to kickstart or to jumpstart this teaching, the anatomy of disobedience, we have to again go back to the original. One of the things that God had told me years ago is, listen, if you just plug into Genesis, there are things in the chapter, right? There are things in the book of Genesis that's so dynamic, that's so life-giving, that most people just read over stuff because it's in the beginning, and the new age kind of mentality is we in the 21st century or the 22nd century or whatever century it is in. People have the idea, this tendency to think that because you're living in the 22nd century or the 21st century or the 23rd century, something that was written in the origin of creation is null and void. And I have to say that that's not so. It's not so. And we, you, me, as people who say we believe God and believe in God, we have to set aside that kind of perception, that kind of mentality, because that's the same kind of mentality that breeds contempt, right? And one thing we don't want to do is have contempt for God, right? Because after all, he was here before us, and guess what? He'll be here after we gone. So he's going to be here regardless. And if you want to be here with him, I suggest, you don't approach the things of God with that kind of mentality, right? So, as I said, we got to go back. We have talked about this idea, this perception, many times in a lot of the teachings, right? This idea that when God said, let us make man, in our image and in our likeness, most people think that God made man like God, right? Like a God. And that may not be what the writers is trying to say in that passage. Because take for instance, I'm sitting in a chair and I'm sitting in front of a table, right? And so if you could just imagine you being in the earth and there's no chairs and no tables. You've never seen a chair, you've never seen a table. And this idea came to you. This idea of creating this table came to you. And you start to make this table. At the end of the project, you could say that the table is made in your image after your likeness. You could say that. And the table doesn't have to be a human being. The table is a table. Right? So if you understand what I'm saying, is you can make something, anything that you create from scratch as an original piece, you could say this thing is created in your image. In other words, you got the picture in your brain, in your mind, in your heart, and you came up with the design, and you brought that design to fruition. And then you could say, hey, I made this here is what I pictured this to be. And I said that to say that when we read in Genesis 1:26, that God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, could very well be that's what God was saying. I'm not making 8 point something billion gods, because it doesn't make sense. Why would a God make 8 point something billion other gods? It doesn't make sense. Especially in light of the fact that when you read the scripture, you continually hear him saying, there's no other God but me. I am the only God. I am, and when you hear that being repeated over and over again through the 5 books of the Torah, through the prophets, through the historical writings, it doesn't make sense that what he did in Genesis 1:26 was make a bunch of other gods. You get the point? So, again, if you ever listen to anything on this channel, it's all about getting the correct perception and rethinking things and refocusing in a way that makes more sense than the way we do things even today. Right? So, that being said, when you look at the human being and you look at the Word of God and what God said about the human being, right? He made us in his image and in his likeness, and he created us. But he created us using the dust of the ground, which, if you think about it, when you die, that's exactly what happens. your physical body turns to dust. As a matter of fact, most things, when they die, their physical presence returns to the earth, to trees. When a tree dies, and over time it rots to the core, it becomes part of the earth. Why? Because that's where it came from. So it makes sense, right? But I want us to understand that when God created us, he knew what he made, he knew what he fashioned, he knew what he created. And we have to understand what he knew and what he knows that he created in us, right? You've heard me say that nothing that exists, no thing that exists in free fall or in free scale or in absolute freedom. Everything that exists, they are locked in by boundaries and barriers and laws and precepts and different things like that, right? That if that wasn't the case, then if I wanted to go to the moon, I wouldn't need a rocket or a spaceship. I would just go outside and jump up and travel as far as I can. But there's a thing called gravity that's not going to allow me to do that. And so to overcome gravity, we have to create planes and trains and automobiles. We have to create rocket ships to get to places that gravity is going to prevent us from getting. It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science. It's simple, it's logical, it's understandable, right? So, dealing with this idea of the anatomy of disobedience, we have to understand these precepts and these principles, and we have to log in, if you will, to these perceptions, because they are crucial and critical to understanding how we function and how we are supposed to function, right? You've heard me say, we talk about God, when he created the human being, he created them, he said, male and female, distinguished and identifiable, having different features, even though they look the same. They have 2 feet, 2 hands, 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, 2 ears, 2 eyes, hair on the head, all that kind of stuff. They look the same, but they have distinguishing features, right? A woman's feature is distinguished, is distinguishingly different from a man's features. I'm telling you, that's how it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be where we look where both male and female, all of a sudden, we look the same. No, you can't identify who is who, okay? That's not what is supposed to be happening. Remember, we're dealing with the biblical narrative. We're dealing with how things are supposed to be, probably why things are the way they are, and unless we kind of make this return, things are going to keep going the way they're going. They will probably get worse, and we will have to pay the piper when the time comes. Okay? So, when we're dealing now with this thing called the anatomy of disobedience, right? You have to understand that. So, when we go back to Genesis, this is where we're going. So, get your Bibles. I ranted on for near 15 minutes. We're going back to Genesis. There's something I need to read in Genesis. We're going back to the conversation that the woman had with the serpent in the garden, because that's where it all started. Kind of, sort of. But in addition to that, we have to go. I want to go into Genesis chapter 2. And I want to read a passage out of Genesis chapter 2, specifically verse 9. right? And then go into Genesis 3 in those first few verses, and then go back and forth. Because as I was reading Genesis 2 yesterday, there was something there that was, wait a second, that's what he said over there, right? And this goes back to the idea that when God created man, when we look at the Hebrew word for man, and we're going to go back and look at these things, we see that the word used to describe this man that God created is a word that's not as perfect as we think it is. So from the jump, from the get-go, mankind, the human being, was not as perfect as we may think we are. Perfect as in a straight line. Perfect as in, things that are perfectly clean, perfectly symmetrical, perfectly in line. That kind of perfection I'm talking about, right? And I want us to see that within the creation of man, within the makeup of man, there were things that were there that may have been deliberately, well, it's not deliberate, it's just the makeup of things. Because, as I said, nothing exists like, how people say, oh man, you gotta be positive, how people push this positive mentality. Well, the truth is, nothing exists in all positive. Nothing. Everything that exists as positive and negative, down to the smallest things. Positive and negative, okay? Good and bad, good and evil and good. However you want. There's always this opposite, if you will, and it is this opposite that keeps everything in balance, that keeps everything the way it's supposed to be. And the thing about God is that God understands everything. He knows everything. So there is nothing that is out of balance for him. That's why, in the book of Proverbs, he says, 6 things I hate, yes, even 7 things are an abomination to me. Right? The first one is a haughty spirit, which is pride. And when you go down the list, you see what he says, a false balance. In other words, he doesn't like anything that's out of whack, a false balance. There must be symmetry in everything. There must be balance in everything. Okay? So that's why he says he's a good God, but then he goes back on the other side and say, I, God, told Isaiah, I create evil. I created the waste to destroy. I create the coals the smith who put the coals into the fire to bring forth, and he talks like that. It's like he's bad, and then he's good, and then he's jealous, and then he's loving and kind, but he's vengeful. You get the point. Guess what? It's the very same with us. He didn't make us gods, but those aspects of him is part of us. But we have to, see, that's our issue. That's our problem. We don't know how to balance. That's why he says, vengeance is mine. I think it's in one of the letters that Paul or Peter, one of them wrote. He said, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. I will repay. In other words, the human mentality doesn't have the capacity to be exactly just, or to be vengeful in an exact proportion. We go too far left or too far right. So our goal is to stay dead center. Even though, and I keep hearing this phrase in my mind, even though, Yeshua, according to the Apostle John, says that he prefers if you're hot or you're cold. He doesn't want you to be lukewarm, right? But everything has to be in its proper perspective. There's a reason why he said that, because he's talking about a certain thing. He's talking about your allegiance to him, right? He doesn't want your allegiance to him being lukewarm. He wants your allegiance to him being like hot like a firecracker, or cold like dog nose, as the old folks would say, right? So that means if you're on his side, I keep saying, I said it at length in the last topic, are you in or are you out? And let me say it again. Every king, every leader, listen, it is inevitable. They demand loyalty. Every parent wants their child to be loyal to them. If you tell your child, you go to school, don't do this, don't do that, you want your child to do exactly what you say. You don't want to tell your child, don't, when you go to school, don't get in trouble, don't smoke weed, don't go hang out with the other kids who do criminal activity. No parent will tell me, well, I tell my son, don't do that. But when you go to school, you do it, and then you like that. You please. No parent wants that from their child. No parent wants an irresponsible child, or a disrespectful child, or a disloyal child. No parent. So how much more do you think a king or some kind of governor, a ruler, somebody in charge of things, how would you be able to run a company properly if you have disloyal workers? Disrespectful. People who don't care about time and management and opportunity and different things like that. How would you run a company like that? You can't. So you need people who are responsible, people who are conscious of what they're doing, people who are time oriented. You need all of that. Or else everything will be chaotic. So, in Genesis chapter 2, after God creates the man from the dust of the ground, after God breathes into the man the breath of life, and man became a living soul, it goes on to say in Genesis 2 and 8, Yehovah Elohim planted a garden eastward in Eden. And you've heard me say this, and I'll repeat it again. When God created the man didn't want for anything. It's just like a parent, two parents giving, the mom giving birth to her child. The parents provide everything for that child. Pampers, clothes. If it's cold, they have coats and jackets and long johns and shoes. If it's warm, they have shorts and everything nice. And they have things for the baby's hair, for the face, for the skin. They have everything. Baby food, baby milk. Listen, every single thing is provided for that child. It's the same thing here. God formed the man and then created a place to put the man. So he formed the man. He planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he formed. And when he put the man in the garden, verse 9, out of the ground, I want you to hear these words because they are crucial and important to this topic called the Anatomy of Disobedience. Right? Why is this topic so important? Because if you read the biblical narrative from front to back, from left to right, right to left, however you read it, the one single complaint you hear from God is He demands your obedience. Well, if He demands your obedience, you have to understand what disobedience is. They come from the same word. Okay? So, I ain't trying no tricks. I'm telling you the truth. But listen, Genesis 2:9 says, out of the ground, Yehovah Elohim made every tree to grow. Every tree that is pleasant to the sight, that is good for food, including the tree of life in the middle of the garden and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, there's a lot to unpack in this. He says, including the tree of life in the midst of the garden. And it says, including the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It didn't specify that the tree of the knowledge and good of evil was in the middle of the garden. It didn't say that. But it did say that the tree of life occupied the central pivotal point in the garden. That's a piece of information that we need to hold on to. So, this verse in Genesis 2:9 says, out of the ground, God, Yehovah Elohim, made every tree to grow that is pleasant to the sight, that is good for food, including the two trees in question, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, go down to verse 16. It says, Yehovah Elohim commanded the man, gave an instruction, gave a Torah, a piece of statute, gave some instructions, some barriers to the man being in the garden. He said, you may freely eat of every tree in the garden, but you shall not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for in the day that you eat of it, you will surely die. Okay? We good with that? Nice. And we know the rest of the story. He said it's not good for the man to be alone. He made the man a wife. Woo! The man was excited. After naming all the animals, he only saw four-legged animals. Some, I don't know if two-legged birds and so on, the ostriches and them. He's like, he not seen anybody looking like him. So of course he's concerned. He's like, wait a minute, where's my partner? I ain't see nobody looking like me. And God, we know God put him to sleep. God created the woman. Let's go down to the last verse in Genesis chapter 2. The man said, now this is bone of my bone. Sorry, that's not the last verse. The last verse is verse 25. It says, the man and his wife were both naked and they were not ashamed. There's a reason why I'm reading these verses, and there's a reason why I'm emphasizing these words. Okay? Now, we are talking about the anatomy of disobedience. We talked, before we go into Genesis 3, let's refresh our mind in Genesis 1:26, right? God said, let us make man in our image and in our likeness, and let them have dominion over everything, right? The fish of the sea and all the birds of the air and stuff. Let us go over this word man. God said, let us make man. The Hebrew word is Adam, okay? And it's mankind. It also has the ruddy, that ruddy innuendo, and ruddy is reddish, okay? It's a human being, right? As an individual or a species called mankind. In the word, in the meaning of the word man and mankind, also has the connotation of being a hypocrite. We have to see that. Right? What's a hypocrite? Go look in the dictionary. I can't tell you everything. Okay? Or a common sort. Wow. Common sort, right? Like a commoner. Commoner is like you're not in any upper echelons of society. You're the commoner, right? It also has the connotation of a person of low degree, right? And it also gives the connotation also of a mean person, right? Mean being angry or mean looking or just a mean person. You know, you look at, oh, that person is mean. You know what I'm saying? They're just mean. You know, like we call nasty. You're just nasty. You just hate everything. It's mean. Listen, all of those things are wrapped up in you and in me. I'm not trying to hide from it. Okay? So when you want to find out where all these, you know, when you get mad and you just so angry, you just want to rip somebody's head off or something. This is part of your makeup, right? But if you don't know that, you would think it's the other person trying to get you mad. No, the other person ain't trying to get you mad. If they don't know that, they're just acting the way they're supposed to or the way they want to act, and then affecting you in the way it affects you. But if both people understand, listen, there's a mean streak in me, then I'll be like, you know what? Let me go back to what God says. And maybe if I go back to what God says, it will help me control. Like with the word fruit of the Spirit, self-control. It'll help me control this mean streak, this meanness, this hypocrisy, this hypocritical, low-degree person that's wrapped up in me. See? That's why self-control is the fruit of the Spirit. Do you think it's there for no reason? It's there for a reason. And guess what? It was there before the fall of man. It was there before the chapter that we're going into. But I want you to see that. I want you to understand that Adam wasn't this sweet, nice, perfect human being that you think he was. Neither was Eve. Neither was the man. Neither was the woman. She was cute and fine and all that, but she wasn't perfect. No, she was not. She had that mean streak in her. Right? And that's just in the rendition of the word Adam. But when we go into the root of that word, it's the Hebrew word kind of with the same sound, Adam, right? And this root is to be red. Well, we know what happens when things get red. Red is an indication of something that is hot, like a hot coals or a hot piece of metal that's in the fire. We know fire has a tendency to show itself as a red flame or red light or whatever. So there we go. It means to be dyed red or rubbed red, right? And we talked about that at length, to show blood in the face, right? And we talked about that being to when you get angry, right? You get red. Some people you can see it, it's obvious. Other people it's not so obvious. But you can still tell if somebody mad, right? By their actions. That's why Paul says, be angry, but do not disobey the instructions of God. Ooh, didn't know that. So we talked about that. And it's not all bad, but when you blush, you see a nice girl and she say hello to you, and you're a single man. I'm talking about you married man. You're a single man. And and a nice girl say hello. You feel all cute, you blush. And the redness shows in your face. Again, For some people, it's easier to see than others. We're not going to get into that. But I want you to understand that this hypocrisy, this mean, this angry, this low down kind of mentality was wrapped up in us from the beginning. This is before the episode in the garden in Genesis chapter 3. Now, let's go to that episode, right? I hope you're getting this, right? I hope this is blessing you guys, because it is blessing me. Because for eons of time, for generation upon generation, we have been taught that it was the serpent, it was he who beguiled, it was the devil, if you will. It was Satan. We always pointing the finger outwardly, not realizing that, wait a second, she had some responsibility. She had some kind of blame, if you will. And I'm not doing this to blame anybody. We're not pointing fingers at people, at characters. We are pointing fingers at truth, hoping that once you get the truth, you will understand yourself better, and it will help you walk a more spirit-filled life. That's the idea. Okay? So I'm not attacking women. I'm not attacking the man. I'm not attacking the devil. I ain't attacking nobody. I'm going into the Word of God to unearth all these wonderful truths. Oh, gosh, it's funny. Anyway, coming back to the story, we're going into Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. Now the serpent was more subtle than any animal in the field which Yehovah Elohim had made. He said to the woman, has God really said, you shall not eat of any tree of the garden? Now, let's fork this up. Let's dig this up, this whole verse. There's some crucial things in this verse that we have to look at. Right? Let's change versions. Let's go, because I want to look at some things. Let's look at the word serpent. The serpent wasn't the devil. That's not what the narrative said. The narrative didn't say, no, the devil. It said, no, the serpent. Well, he's given that name for a reason. He's given that name serpent because of who he is and how he communicates. He hisses. Psst. We see on Sesame Street, this is, I'm Sammy the Snake, and I have to confess that I look kind of song like the letter S. S. That's how he communicates. So he's ascribed a name according to who he is. Remember, God made him. And when God made him, God said it was very good. So there's nothing wrong with the serpent. The serpent has his, he has his role to play. There's nothing wrong with him. So stop blaming him. The serpent did nothing but communicate. Okay? So the word serpent is the word nakash, right? That means serpent, snake, image of a serpent, the fleeing serpent, which is mythological. Okay? And it means snake because of its hiss. And that word nakash comes from the root word nakash, right? And that word means to practice, listen, to practice divination, to divine, to observe signs, to learn by experience. That one was crucial because Philippians says that Yeshua learned obedience by the things which he suffered. So he learned through his experiences. He learned to be obedient. Does that mean he was a serpent? Does that mean he was a devil? Does that mean he was wicked and bad? It does not. It just shows that wrapped up in everything is these innuendos, that these opposites that make up these things, that if you flow in any certain direction, you could be over or you could be under. And the idea is to maintain composure, to be in control of who you are. Proverbs says that a man who cannot control his spirit is like a city without walls, a city without protection. Anybody, any gang could just roll in that city and take over. A man, that's in the book of Proverbs. That's not even in the fruit of the spirit list. So, what are we saying? What are we saying? I'm saying the fruit of the spirit didn't just pop out of nowhere. God has been saying this from the get-go, from the jump. We have to be in control. Not just of ourselves, but of everything in the earth. It's simple, people. So, to practice divination, to be divine, the divine, right, which comes from the word divination, or divination comes from the word divine. To divine is like create scenes where you could see into the spirit. And God doesn't want us to do these things to see into the spirit. He wants us to see into the spirit by reading the word, understanding the word, getting to know him. So we don't have to see into anything. All we have to do is, God, and he just tell us. And if he don't tell us, then it's his prerogative. The secret things belong to Yehovah, and the things that are revealed belong to men, so that they will be obedient to him. Simple. It's all wrapped up and tied up in the novel, in the Bible, in the written narrative. We have to be focused, people. We have to pay more attention. To learn by experience, to diligently observe, what is to diligently observe? That's a fruit of the Spirit that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 12, 13, and 14. What is that? To be discerning. To diligently observe is to be able to discern things. To look at a thing in operation diligently and discern how the thing is in operation, why it's in operation, and what's the purpose of it being in operation. That's the gift of discernment. Yeshua said it best in the gospel. He said, be as wise as a serpent. Woo, listen. But as harmless as a dove. What are we fighting? Who are we fighting? We are talking about the anatomy of disobedience. Diligently observe. It also says practicing fortune telling. God doesn't want us to practice fortune telling. God doesn't want us to take no chickens and wring the neck and sprinkle the blood and go into no heavy jabba kind of things and try to conjure up. No. That's not how we have to live. We have to live by his instructions, by his word. and eat bread too. Because man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word, bread alone. So he wants you to eat bread, but he also wants you to eat his word. You see what I'm saying? All of this is wrapped up in the meaning of this serpent. To observe signs and omens. To take, we look up at this. He gave us the moon and the sun as signs for times and for seasons. He said that. As signs for times and for seasons. The word month comes from the word moon. That's why we have to look for the new moon every moon or every month so we can know when is a new month. And for seasons, he's talking about moedim, for certain times, for us certain like Sabbath, certain Sabbaths, certain festivals, certain feasts that he outlined in what most believers today disregard and call it old. It's old. We don't have to do that no more. The sun and the moon is still up in the sky, isn't it? Ain't them? That's terrible English. Aren't they? And Strong's adds to that by saying it's a primitive root, which properly means to hiss, like a whisperer, dog whisperer, horse whisperer, gossiper. It's the same gossiper. That's why you're not supposed to gossip. You're not supposed to be a gossiper. That's bad. That's what you're practicing here, all this gossiping, because you want your information through this hissing. That is to whisper a spell. We don't know how dangerous words are. You don't even know how dangerous you could be. You're a single man and you see a nice girl and you chatting her down. You use words. But what are you trying to do? You're trying to win her over. You're trying to get her to fall in love. In the worst case scenario, you're just trying to be a bad boy and trying to get into you know what and trying to get her to give up you know what. And that's bad. That's not what it's supposed to be. That's how you can do. You can become a whisperer too and cast a spell over that girl. And vice versa. She can be a whisperer and cast a spell over you. Bet you didn't know that. Generally, to prognosticate. Go look up that word. Don't take... No, I'm not telling you everything. To divine, again. To be an enchanter. You know that person that's enchanting? Anybody that's so enchanting, so sweet and kind and loving? I'm doing everything I can to be that way for all the right reasons. Okay? God is the kindest person you will ever meet if you ever met him. Sweetest person you will ever know if you ever know him. Ain't nobody as good as God. No one. So it's not a bad thing to be enchanting and to be kind and sweet and loving and caring. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, Strong's throws in also learn by experience and to be to observe diligently. Again, all those are parts of gifts, fruit of the Spirit, gifts of the Spirit. So you thinking the serpent is some devil. No, he's not. Now, the serpent was more subtle or more crafty or more cunning than any beast of the field. You are not a beast of the field. We are human beings. And we have to stop categorizing ourselves as beasts. That's what deception creates. Makes us think that we are beasts, and we are not. We are not beasts. We are human beings. We are different. But he, the serpent, is more, as according to the written narrative, was more subtle and crafty of any beast. He was smarter than all the animals in the field. But let's look at the word subtle, what that means. Because I want to go look at the word naked and see what that means, and show you that they have the same root. They come from the same tree, if you will. It's two apples, it's two oranges, but it's in two different people's hands, so they operate differently. The word subtle is the word arum. Arum, I want a room. And it means to be subtle, shrewd, crafty, sly, sensible, prudent, cunning, subtle, right? But that word comes from the root, and the root of that word is aram. And that means to be subtle, to be shrewd, to be crafty, to beware, to be careful, cautious, to take crafty counsel, to be prudent, just like diligently observe, to become shrewd, right? And there are some very shrewd people, but there's a difference between being shrewd and being naked, if you will. There's a difference, right? Shrewd has to do with the harshness of things, of being smart. You know what I'm saying? You're shrewd without compassion, without care, without without emotion. That's shrewd, right? But when Yeshua said, "Be wise as a serpent, but harmless as a dove," that cunning, that wisdom is the wisdom of the serpent, but it's with the emotion and the feeling and the compassion of God. That's why he put it like that. Okay? And the aram is a primitive root properly to be or to make beer. Beer, to be beer. Like to be open and honest. Right? And integrous. That's what that root is. Okay? To be smooth like butter. To be eloquent. Right? To be enchanted. All of those things, that is come from the root of that word aram. It comes from that tree. All those different words and the variation in the words. To be cunning. Again, this is the serpent we're talking about. This is who he is. This is how God created him. And God said it's very good. This is not no devil. So, when we think about this conversation in the garden, we have to rethink the conversation. Was it ingenuous of the serpent to try to trick the woman? Was he trying to trick her? Is the question. We don't know. I don't know, because the way he is part of who he was. So maybe to him, he was just having a conversation. Right? Because of how he was made. To him, I'm just having a dialogue with this woman. I'm not trying to get her to do anything. But, before I go there, hold on. Let's go to Genesis 2. Let's go back to the end of Genesis 2 and look at the word naked to prove my point. Not to prove my point, but to make it known, right? The word naked, guess what the word is? Arum. Aroma. A room. Right? To be nude. We talked about that with the serpent. Either partially or totally. And the root of the word arum is the word aram. We go right back to that tree. So in Genesis 2 and 25, it says they were both naked and they were not ashamed because there was nothing to be ashamed of. They were both naked. What she looked like didn't make the man feel funny. And what the man looked like didn't make her feel. There was no... And I was looking at Seinfeld yesterday. I love Seinfeld. And there's this episode with Seinfeld where George was in some job he was doing, and there was in some board meeting or in some meeting, and something happened, and he got upset, and he said he quit, and he walked out, right? Because they was giving him some nickname, and he didn't like it. So he got mad and he walked out. And then him and Jerry had this conversation and Jerry told him, well, just go back and pretend it never happened, So he did. He went back and he pretended it never happened, and everybody was like, no, I thought you quit. Anyway, he came up with this, the guy still fired him. And then he came up with this idea with the girl, what's her name, Elaine, to slip, because the boss was having some celebration. And he wanted to take revenge, right? Take revenge. So he got Elaine to try to divert the man's attention so he could slip the man a Mickey. Well, what did Elaine start to talk about to get the man's attention? She started to talk about she'd like to be naked, and she went in this naked colony, and I said all of that to say, people do with this. Listen, there was naked and unashamed. People do that today. They go to these nude beaches. They have these naked colonies. They take off all the clothes and they walk around naked. And they try to recreate that because it's in the Bible. They say Adam and Eve was naked and nobody was ashamed, so why should they be ashamed? I ain't telling you that go do that. I'm just making a point. And my point is, they take stuff that they just read without getting the full understanding, and then they try to replicate. Right? People try to walk naked all over the place. They try to be naked downtown Manhattan, and it's all, everybody's trying to go back to whatever. But that's not the point. The point is, that's what naked means. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Right? We are who we are. You look like how you look. I look like how I look. There's nothing to be ashamed of. We cool. Well, it was good for the man and the woman. It's good for the serpent. There's nothing wrong with him. So she had some cunning. She grew from the same tree. She's a branch from the same tree that he is from. But he was in the field. See? He had the beast wisdom. He was shrewd. He was emotionless. He was heartless. She had the heart of God, the heart that God gave her. She had compassion, like we talked about in the last session, 21 feet of it. And God said, don't shut up your bowels of compassion. She had it. She have emotion. He doesn't. See? See the difference? So stop comparing yourself to a beast, because you're not. You're not an animal. So let's go back to Genesis 3, continue the conversation. They are having this conversation. And he said, still in Genesis 3:1, did God really say, you shall not eat of any tree of the garden? And the woman responds, we may eat fruit of the trees of the garden, but not of the fruit of the tree that's in the middle of the garden. Again, remember, if we read the verse, Genesis 2:9 or 8, where we read, it didn't say not to eat from the tree in the middle of the garden. He said not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I don't know if that particular tree was in the middle of the garden, but we know that the tree of life was in the middle of the garden. Okay, just throwing that in. So I don't know if the woman is getting her facts twisted. I don't know. These things become important because people cast them different ways, right? Because people say, well, she didn't say exactly what God said, and she added to what God said and whatever. And listen, if you want to say that, I ain't mad at you, okay? That's not the point I'm making. And God said, right, go back to Genesis 3:3, in the last line, God has said, you shall not eat of it, you shall not touch it, lest you die. Right? Which is a kind of paraphrase, which you do it, I do it, everybody do it. So don't be mad at the girl if she paraphrased something God said, because everybody does it. You get my point? Well, the serpent responds to the woman in verse 4, you won't really die. He's saying it. No, you're not going to die. Okay, maybe the serpent knows something. Again, maybe he's just speaking out of what he thinks. I don't know. I'm just reading what he says. He says, you won't die. Because God knows that in the day that you eat it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Right? Let me go into verse 6. And when the woman saw, listen, when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took some of its fruit and ate. And she gave some to her husband with her, and he ate too. Wait a second. Let's go back to Genesis 2 one more time and read that verse. He says, when she saw, the verse says in verse 9, out of the ground, Yehovah Elohim planted every tree to grow that was pleasant to the sight. But when she saw that the tree was pleasant to look at, wait a second. She didn't know that God made every tree that was already pleasant. It was, you understand what I'm saying? So the writer is being kind of redundant here. Unless, I'm just saying, we're talking about the anatomy of disobedience, right? He made every tree that was pleasant to the sight and every tree that was good for food, including the tree of life in the middle of the garden and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So the two trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, were already commissioned as trees that the fruit was good to eat. Did we see that? Do we understand that? Because verse 9 says in Genesis 2, God made every tree to grow that was pleasant to the sight and that was good for food, including those two trees. You understand? So the trees were already included in the food eating group, in the good to eat food group, in the edible food group, if you will. She is saying, the narrative here is saying, as if, wait a second, she just realized, wait a second, this is good fruit. I could eat from this fruit. There's nothing wrong with eating from the fruit. Technically, she is right and she is wrong. The tree was already labeled good to eat. The only thing preventing her from eating from that tree was the commandment, thou shalt not eat. Get it? So, all of this, none of this other stuff matters really. Because, according to Paul, in Romans 7 that we read in the last session, the act of being disobedient is locked up and tied up with the commandment to be obedient. But Moses said, I give you today, Deuteronomy 11 and 26, a blessing and a curse. God gave to the man in the garden a blessing and a curse. Is what you do that's more important. What you perceive, that's more important. Not what the serpent says, not what the neighbor says, not what anybody else say. They could say whatever they want to say. It's more important about what you do. So your perception of obedience is very important. Moses said, I lay before you a blessing and a curse. A blessing if you obey. A curse if you disobey. What did he lay? The commandments, the Torah, the instructions. God said, he didn't say, I lay before you a blessing. And no, he didn't say it like that. But he made everything good to eat, including the two trees in question, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They were both with fruit that was good to eat. So it has nothing to do with what the serpent is saying. Oh, because God knows that. No, it had nothing to do with that. But you see, it had everything to do with what does the woman perceive? What does she do with the information she has? And instead of holding fast to obedience, she leaned towards being disobedient. That's what Paul was talking about in Romans 7, in 6. And all where he talked about sin and the law came because of sin, and sin came because of the law, and all that kind of stuff. That's what he was alluding to. Because if God said he created all the trees in the garden with fruit, with edible fruit, if he didn't say don't eat from that tree, then there would be no sin if she went and decided to eat from the tree. But again, we have to understand that every king, whether the king is a good king or a bad king, doesn't really matter, okay? Listen to what I'm saying. It doesn't matter what kind of king he is. It doesn't matter his character. It doesn't matter his personality. It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. What's more important is any king, the demands are the same. Every king demands loyalty. Every king demands affinity. Go to my favorite queen, Daenerys in Game of Thrones. Oh boy, when she started to climb the ladder, everything was bend the knee, you ought to bend the knee. She didn't care who you were. I'm the king in the north. Oh, you're the king in the north? No, you're a rebel. You bend the knee because I'm the queen of the seven kingdoms. She's trying to say, I'm the queen of the kingdom that you say you're the king of. And as a result of that, you are in rebellion. So you ought to bend the knee to me. You, Mr. King of the North, Mr. Jon Snow, you have to pay homage to me because I am the rightful heir of the throne, of the king, of the seven, of the queen, of the leader of the seven kingdoms. And so she demanded that. She demanded loyalty from all her subjects. Listen, it's not abstract. It's not a far-fetched idea. You know, people was mad at Trump saying he demands loyalty. Listen, every president, Biden demands loyalty too. Don't think, no, it's foolish of you, sir, of you, ma'am, to think that your king, that your leader does not demand your loyalty to him. I am just saying that your bigger leader, your greater leader, he demands loyalty to him. We're talking about King Yeshua, King Jesus, King Yehovah, King God. However you want to say it. King Yahweh, Yahushua, however you say it. That king demands your loyalty the same way. So, this idea that you could be disobedient and disloyal, it doesn't fly. We have to understand it's up to you. You have to be in a place to observe diligently what you are to do, whether you are siding with your heavenly Father, your Creator, your Elohim, who demands your loyalty, or whether you are siding with any other who still demands your loyalty. And I'm saying you cannot be loyal to both parties. You have to choose a side. Yes, you have to choose. Whom shall you serve? Because it is well written, you become a servant to whomever you obey. You can't say, I obey God, but then you disobey everything he says. And you obey disobedience, as we talked about last week. Right? So the woman for some reason, according to the way the writer writes it, it gives you the impression that this is something she's now realizing. Wait a second. I could really eat from this tree. Well, you could have eaten from the tree all the time. The tree was made to be eaten from. The only thing that stopped you from eating from that tree is the command not to eat from that tree. And that is what sin is. Sin is disobeying the commandment of God. I can't put it any simpler. I can't say it any easier. Sin is disobedience. They are one and the same. If you disobey God, you will be in sin. That's what sin is. I don't know how to put it any other way, at least right now. Okay? The anatomy of disobedience is part of who you are. But God gave us these instructions. He gave us these parameters. He gave us this Torah so that when we walk in them, when we operate in them, we will be in line to be blessed. David said, "Your word, O God, have I hidden in my heart that I would not be disobedient to you." Your word. A parent tells a child, don't do something. If the thing shows itself and the child does it, doesn't make the thing bad, it just draws the thing out of the child, the potential to be bad. And that's what happened with the woman. If the child looks at the thing and says, my father said he doesn't want me to smoke that weed, and refuses to smoke, then guess what? The child operates in the instruction of the father. Doesn't mean that the weed, the opportunity, the people, the encouragement to do it is going to just walk away. It just might come back. Guess what? You have to do the same thing. Not today. Not today. I told you that the last time. My mind ain't changed. You see what I'm saying? And every time. Let's go to Genesis chapter 4. Let's witness the first, after she disobeyed, we're going to see another. Listen, this is conversation. God is talking to Cain. Listen to what is being said. Cain hears what is being said. But he's so angry, that meanness in him is so conjured up. It's so, he's standing on his last nerve. I remember I told you the story about me and my ex. And she used to say, boy, you get me on my last nerve. And I say, well, you need to go back on your first nerve. So if I get on your nerve, you'll be on your second nerve, and then your third and your fourth. It'll take you a while to get to your last nerve. But if you stand up on your second, the last nerve, the next push you get will take you to the last nerve, right? It was my way of being comical. Right? So, let's go. So we're going to go two places. We saw what the woman did. She did not diligently observe. She did not operate in what she was supposed to operate in, and she was deceived. Okay? Peter said that. She was deceived. Or Paul, one of them. Let's go flip over to Cain. And from Genesis 4, we're going to Matthew 4. Okay? I'm going to show you the difference. Genesis 4:1 says, and the man knew Yehovah his wife, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain, and said, I have gotten a man with Yehovah's help. It's a good thing. And she gave birth again to Cain's brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Right? Two diverse personalities. I talked about that in one of my teachings. I can't remember which one. But again, if we understand the world of personalities, you'll get the gist. Verse 3, as time passed, Cain was the first one who brought an offering to Yehovah. You would think, wait a second, Abel he's always touted as the more godlike person. Right? But it was Cain was the one who first brought an offering to Yehovah. And that's interesting. Cain brought an offering to Yehovah from the fruit of the ground. Right? And you hear me say, he's a tiller of the ground. What else could he have given? Go by his brother Abel and say, hey, give me a sheep? I don't know. He could have done that, but he didn't. This is a side note. Verse 4. Abel also brought some of the firstborn of his flock and of its fat. Why? He was a shepherd. He had sheep. So they both brought to Yehovah things that they had a hand in, right? Work of their hands. No problem. I have no problem with that. But here's where the situation starts to unfold. Yehovah had respect to Abel and his offering, but he didn't have respect to Cain and his offering. Okay. All right. And most people tie that to the kind of offering, which I disagree with. I say if we read a little bit further on, we will find out why God didn't have respect for Cain and for his offering. Remember, he didn't have respect for Cain and the offering Cain made. So it wasn't just the offering, it was him first. You know what? You're so nasty. I don't respect you. I don't respect anything you give. That's the situation. So it's not what he gave. It's who he was, how he presented that gift. It had a lot to do with what was going on. As I said, if we keep reading, we will see that. Cain was very angry. Verse 5. And the expression on his face fell. Remember how the man was created? Adam, the redness in his face, he was angry. Well, if you're angry and you're light skinned, we're going to see the blood in your face, right? That's your makeup. So, here's the solution. Yehovah, verse 6, Yehovah said to Cain, what's up, bro? Why are you angry? And why has the expression of your face fallen? Why are you red? I'm seeing red in your face. You like, how the cartoons just show you the red in the face and the devil face with the two horns come up like that. Come on, bro. Why are you so upset? Listen, let's keep reading. He says, if you do well, won't you be lifted up? Won't your expression be lifted up? In other words, if you did something that was good, won't your countenance be different? Won't your appearance be different? Won't you be a little more happy or a little more joyful? Joy being the fruit of the Spirit. Well, happy is the fruit of the Spirit because joy and happiness is like, what was that word? What? The synonyms. Yeah. There you go. That's the word. They were synonyms. Joy and happiness, they're synonyms. If you did well, won't you be more happy? Listen, keep reading. Verse 7 still says, if you don't do well, what's at the door? The narrative says sin. But I want you to read, I want you to hear this word. If you don't do well, disobedience is at the door. Disobedience. That means God knows your heart, bro. I'm just telling you, sis. God already knows what's going on in there. What, you can fool everybody. You can fool anybody. Can't fool him. So God is already seeing what's going on in Cain and is trying to realign him. He's trying to readjust his movement, adjust his perception. So hopefully he grabs hold of it and will begin to walk in that way. But if we keep reading, we realize Cain ain't interested. Because Cain think, you know the word, I ain't gonna say it, but Cain think he the man. Cain think it's all about him. God said, disobedience is crouching at the door and it's waiting for an opportunity. It's waiting for an opportunity. God also says, same verse 7, its desire is for you. Its disobedience is desirous of you. Who said that? Who said that? Yeshua told somebody that. Oh, Peter. Somebody is asking for you. But don't worry, I already prayed for you. See, that was Peter. This is Cain. But God is saying the same thing. Hey, Cain, disobedience, its desires for you. But guess what, Cain? You can rule over it. I'm telling you that to your face. Could you imagine God is saying that to you? You could rule over that, Keith. You could rule over that, Larry. You could rule over that, Betty. You could rule over that. Don't let that rule you. I'm telling you, you can rule over it. What does Cain do? Keep reading, right? Verse 8. And Cain said to Abel, his brother, let's go in the field. Why are you saying that to your brother? You already premeditated. God just said to you, this thing is coming after you. You disregard the word of the Lord. What did Yeshua say? Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. So God just says, you can rule over that thing, but its desire is for you. Guess what? You give in to this desire. Hey, Abel, let's go in the field, man. Let's go in the tall bushes over there. Why are you going in the tall bushes? And while they were in the field, Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and killed him. Why? Yeshua says, if you have an offering, before you take your offering to the altar, examine your heart, just in case you have an ought against your brother. See, this is the situation. We don't have insight into the whole history of Abel and Cain and Abel, but we do know that Cain had some beef with Abel. We don't know why. But Cain definitely had some beef. And instead of settling his beef and moving on, he just got more angry. When God talked to him, he got more angry. He told Abel, let's go in the bushes. Guess what? Be angry and sin not. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. All of those things are instructions. Cain didn't care. He killed his own brother. In closing, let's go to Matthew chapter 4. The anatomy of disobedience. It's not what somebody does. It's what you do. How do you respond? That is crucial. Matthew 4, verse 1. Then Yeshua was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tried or tempted by the devil. I'm just reading the narrative. I'm not going into who the devil is and all that. That's a different topic. When he had fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, I'm telling you, who I have fasted not for 40 days and 40 nights, but I've fasted for 7 days, 7 nights. I've done some, absolute fast, no water, nothing, for a few, for some time. I don't want to go into that. I know how it is. I have fasted and prepared food, fasted and cooked. Picture yourself fasting for 40 days and 40 nights. He was hungry afterwards. Nothing illogical, nothing abnormal about that. Here comes the other side, right? You're fasting 40 days and 40 nights. You're hungry, right? So your thoughts begin to envision food. You start to think about food. The tempter came and said to him, if you are the Son of God, command these stones to become bread. Well, in essence, because he knows who he is, he can do that, right? Because he's hungry. He could pick up a stone and start to eat it. And the stone will automatically be transformed into a piece of bread. But from a human perspective, that's not how food is made. Right? You either go to the restaurant or you go to the kitchen and you prepare food. So, from the human perspective, if he's hungry, he has to come out of the wilderness and go to a place where he could get food. But he's in the wilderness. So places where he could get food might be few and far between. I don't know. I'm just painting a picture for you that it would have been easier for him to just pick up a stone and turn the stone into bread and eat. And he would have been satisfied. It would have been easier for him to think about a quail flying through the sky and the quail fall. He's the Son of God. He could do whatever he wants to eat. But remember, he's in perfect obedience. He's operating as a man. Here is his response. He's having the same conversation. Did God say that tree you shouldn't eat? His response is this. It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. In other words, I'm a human being. That's not how we make food, sir. We cook, we prepare food. I can't just pick up the stone and eat it, even though I could. But see, you trying to prove a point, and I'm trying to prove that I'm a man. I'm just a plain regular man. So he got him out of the way. Here he comes again, verse 5. Devil took him into the holy city, Jerusalem, set him on the pinnacle of the temple, highest place, and said to him, If you are the Son of God, now, Yeshua never said he was the Son of God. He knows who he is, but you see how things play out, right? The other person is pushing the buttons, trying to push these buttons, trying to get him to act out of character. If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. Because, just now you said it was written. Well, I know it is written that he will command his angels concerning you, on whose hands they will bear up, so that you won't dash your foot against a stone. Because that's the word of God written in the book of Psalms. Psalms 91, 11 through 12. It's scripture. So that the opposite, the enemy saying, I know scripture too. Ain't it written? If you cast yourself down, he wouldn't allow your feet to dash against a stone. No, he's going to protect you. He's going to keep you. Right? Yeshua responds, verse 7. Listen, again, it is written. So, devil say it is written. He say, yeah, but it's also written. You shall not tempt. You shall not test. Listen, you, devil, shall not test Yehovah, your God. So the devil he's not out there doing his own thing. The serpent is just being the serpent. He's just being who he is. The devil, if you want to call him that, is just being who he is. Everything is hinged on what you do. He said, it is also written, you, devil, shall not test Yehovah, your God. It's moving on. You think it was over, huh? Here comes him again. Verse 8, again the devil took him to an exceedingly high mountain, showed him all the kingdoms of the world. Whoa. Come on, man. This is your legacy. Leave this for your children. All the money, all the glory, all the gold, all the silver, the fine houses, the best women, the nicest cars. All the records in the record book for soccer or basketball or football or whatever sport you play. You can have it all. Oh, you're in the music industry? Man, you can have all the platinum records, all the gold records. You could have all the hits. Verse 9, he said to him, the devil, I will give you all these things if you will but fall down and worship me. What does it mean to fall down and worship somebody? What does that mean? Remember I said every king demands loyalty. Every king demands loyalty. They demand, according to Daenerys Targaryen, that you bend the knee. This is what he wants. He wants you, Yeshua. You must bend the knee and you must allow me the privilege of being your master, being your king, being your leader. Verse 10. Then Yeshua said to him, get thee behind me, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship, you, Satan, shall worship Yehovah your Elohim, and you shall serve him only. In other words, you the servant, not me. You are the servant. You're not a master. You are the servant. You are a servant among other servants. And so, Yeshua here, who Paul describes as the second Adam, the second human being, the second man raised up to show the first man how he should have operated in the beginning. Not go for glory, not go for fame and fortune, not go for pleasantries of life, but obey the word of Yehovah. In order to understand obedience, we must know what disobedience is. In order to understand what disobedience is, we must know what obedience is. Obedience and disobedience, they come from the same word. Sanity, insanity. They come from the same word. Loyalty, disloyalty. They come from the same word. But they mean different things. You can't operate in both of them. Yeshua said you can't serve God and money. Because you would love one and hate the other, or you would hate the one and love the other. You cannot serve two masters. You can't serve obedience and disobedience. So it's not the neighbor's fault. It's not my ex's fault. It's not nobody's fault, if you will. It's not a matter of pointing fingers at the devil, at her, at him, at you, at me. No. It's having the correct perception. It's understanding who God is. That's his desire for us, is to get to know him and how he operates. And he has given us his instructions so that when we know them, we could free flow. When things like this happen, we can respond the way we're supposed to respond. Amen. I'm bringing this to a close. I don't know if we could add anything else, right? But disobedience starts in there, in you. It doesn't start in the devil. It starts in you. You have to rid yourself of that, like Yeshua did. He is the preeminent example. He is the preeminent one. He is the predestined one. He is the one with the name that's above every name. Not me, not you. That's the mark. We have to do what he did. Turn your Bibles to Numbers chapter 6. In closing. Numbers 6 and verse 22 through 27. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope something was said in this teaching that would bring to life or bring to light some of the things that would make sense, that would encourage you to change your life some way for the better. All right. Next week, we're going to we're going to talk about testing. You have to be tested. God, you have to know if you will pass or fail. Again, it's dependent on what you do. God is not going to demand. God is not going to. That's what free will is. That's what freedom is. It's you having this blessing and this curse, and you deciding what you're going to go for. What you're going to do. God is not going to decide it for you. You have to make the choice. You have to make the decision. That's what freedom is. He's not going to force you to do it. He can, but that's not his mode of operation. Number 6, 22 through 27 reads as follows. Yehovah spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and to his sons, saying, this is how you shall bless the children of Israel. You shall tell them, Yehovah bless you and keep you. Yehovah cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yehovah lift up his countenance towards you and give you peace." So, or that's the way, you will put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Until next time, Shavua Tov, Shabbat Shalom, Buen Nuit, Buenas Tardes, Buenas Noches, Buenos Dias, Adios, Arrivederci, Deuces, peace. See you. Bye.